All right. So far, we have worked on creating, registering an account, logging the user to the dashboard, and we have applied some middlewares, and we have done some other functionalities like sending an email using events and queues, events and listeners, and we have also applied queues. Now, what I want is basically I want to keep track of everything that is happening inside my system. Now, what I basically means is that I want to create a log of whatever the request is coming into my application, whether it is creating something or updating something or deleting something. And this can further vary upon many other functionalities or many other features. But for now, what I want is basically to record everything that what is happening, who is doing what. So in that way, we will have basically a complete track of our application, what is happening, who is doing, and we can eventually at some point, if there is something illegal happens in our system, so we would be able to track who was the actual person behind it. All right. So in that prospect, I am going to introduce you to two different things. Now, the first thing we will talk about the model observers, and the second thing is that we will talk about the polymorphic relationships. Obviously, there are a lot of relationships in Laravel, but we are diving right now into the main advanced concept of the Laravel, which are polymorphic relationships. Now, because why are we jumping in that? I will explain you later in this video. Now, first of all, what I want is that let's just boot up our server. So I will say, let this terminal load. So I will say, all right, PHP artisan serve. Now it will create, obviously, you know that it will create a server for us. And what I want is basically, I want to keep track of if the user has created an account. So once the account will be created, what I want is that I want to create or I want to log that user to keep track of it, what happened actually. So for that, what I will do is basically I will create new migration and that will be named as logs table. So I will say, I don't know why my terminal is taking too much long. So PHP artisan make migration create logs table like so. Hit enter and it will obviously create logs table for us. So let's open the logs underscore table. And by the way, I am following the PHPs from shorter conventions, short codes or short keys to actually get to some file very quickly. So what I want here is basically, I want now how, so we will apply the polymorphic relation on this table. So what, how, and what are polymorphic relationships? So first, let's understand about that. Now, the polymorphic relationships in Laravel documentation. Now, the Laravel documentation says that uh, the example the Laravel documentation code is basically we have different kind of posts. A post could be related to an image, or a post could be related to a page, or a post could be related to a video. Now, these are three different type of posts, and these three are obviously coming from different tables. What we want is basically if any comment happens on either of the post, so we want to not create three different tables for each, but we want to have only one table that records all the logs, or keep track of what comment has been made against which kind of post. So that is only doable using the polymorphic relationships. If you have not understand still what the polymorphic relationships are, I hope so you will be able to know by the end of this video, or if you still find some issue, you can contact me inside the comments. All right, so what I will do, I will basically want is basically I want the integer first of all, and I will name it as user underscore id, and by default I will make this as null level, and I also want this to be index. So in some cases the user id does exist, and in some cases it will not exist. Now the second thing is basically table and I want the morph to this morphs. So what I want to do is basically log. So I want this to be just only a log. Now what this morph does basically. So if you go here, this will take the name and the index name. So the index name will be obviously the ID of the model, and the type will be basically the type of the model, or actually the model instance itself. So what will happen here is basically this will create two different kind of columns for us. One will be the logable ID and the logable type. And what else we want is the actual string, and I will call it as action, what action took, and maybe a long string, and this long string will contain some kind of data. All right, so I will go and I will say PHP artisan migrate. So this create a new migration for us. Let's go into the database and check what really has happened here. Now if I come to this logs table, and you will find that we have log type and the log ID. Now the Laravel documentation says that it is logable and loggable ID and loggable type. So this does not matter. If you follow that convention, that will still work. But if you follow this convention, this will also work. So there will be no issue with that prospect as well. So I think so we should follow the Laravel convention to make these things more realistic and more readable. So I will say logable like so, and I will just do one the migration one more time. So I will say first of all rollback. So this will roll back our old migration and just migrate one more time. There we go. So reload the logs table, and there we go. We have logable type and logable ID. Now what I want is basically to keep track of what user has been created, which user has been created, and which action has been taken. Now in order to do that, how we can do, like we can do this inside the register. So once the user has been registered, we can call some kind of function here. We can trigger some kind of function here. But that's another approach, and obviously we will violate the single action controllers. So right now we are not following the solid principles. I know there is a lot of things going on here, like the action has been taken and these steps are also going on here, so that violates the single action controller principle. But still that will go if we create another function. Obviously in the future we will have to refactor the code as well. So what I basically want is basically to, once the user has been registered, so I want Laravel to automatically check if the account has been created and throw some kind of action on it. So for that, what we will do is basically we will introduce you to the Laravel observers. So what they do is basically, let's go ahead and create one observer. PHP artisan make observer. Now like so, and I will name it as user observer, and I will bind this to the model of user like so. Sorry, not model, model, like so. And if we come to our app HTTP, you will see the observers here. And if you open it up, so you can see by default this created some methods for us. So first created, updated, deleted, restored, first deleted. Now these two methods, restored and force deleted, now what they actually do, so by the name of this you might have understand that what Laravel is actually going to do with these observers. So created is obviously once the user has once the record has been created, updated, deleted. But what are these two functions for? Now the restored and force deleted only applies on when you have implemented the soft delete inside your application, and we will work on that in the later video. you will see, you will get the idea of what's happening in what will happen in those two functions. So right now what I want is that once the record has been created, I want the Laravel to actually check for me that what is actually happened. So if I just dump and die here, and I will say user, like so, and we are not going to call anything here. Laravel will automatically observe this thing for us. So what I want to do is basically refresh this page, create an account, register. Oh, all right. So we have not yet been loaded with this one. So the account has been created, and let me see. Now, before we actually jump upon to this register functionality here and to automatically, so Laravel will not automatically detect this thing until unless we boot this observer in our event service provider. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to call the load the event service provider, and inside the boot method, what I will do is basically I will call the user model, and I will pass in the observe. So inside the observe, I will type in the user observer class, like so. Pretty simple. And if I come reload the page, fill the data, register it, and there we go. Now you can see that we Laravel is giving us the user which we have dump and died here. Now from here we can see that the Laravel is just actually called this function. Even this form, the rest of the functionality has been neglected. So Laravel came till here and it just stopped here. So this functionality has not yet been performed. Now, what I want is basically I want to log the event that what happened inside here. So in order to apply the polymorphic relationships, what we need to do is basically we have to build a relationship with that table. So first of all, I'm going to create a model, PHP artisan make model, and I will call it log model. And inside the log model, where we have this one, I will just simply say um, protected, sorry, protected, guarded, and allow everything. All right. So what I want to do is basically I want to load the user model with us, and I want to have a relationship here. So what I will say, public function logs, and here I will return dollar this morph many, and inside the morph many I will load this model, sorry, the class, and the name will be logable, like so. Now what this thing is doing, basically user will have more than one logs inside the logs table. So obviously this thing is pretty straight that this have morph many, so it's similar to has many. So this has morph many, but the both actually work in a different way. So what I also want to return here is basically morph many, like so. I think this should work. Or let's see, of many, like so. So what we are going to do is here, I'm really sorry, what else we are going to do, basically we have created the relation, and inside our observers what I'm going to do, basically we have observers, and we also have relation here. So what I'm going to do is basically log, sorry, uh, user, and I'm going to call the logs mod method, and I'm going to create the logs on it, and inside here I'm going to pass the array, and our array accepts two things. First one is the action, and inside the action I'm going to make this as um, account registered. Now from where it registered I can also pass in here, and the next thing I want is the data, and inside the data I will just simply pass in the user, and this will create the log for us. Now if I just reload this page, and right now you see we have no record here. And if I just form fill this one, register the account, and we should be probably able to see the data here. All right, there we go. Now what it did is basically the loggable types. It has on instantly called the instance or the full path of our model, the loggable ID. Now this ID is basically the ID of the user. So if we come here to our users, and you will see probably we will have the ID of 23 here. We should have, yeah, this one. And the action, it is account registered, and the data is basically the JSON format of the actual user data. All right, so everything is pretty much simple here. What we actually did is basically, let me recap this thing so you can have a better understanding. Firstly, we created the observers, this one, and the way we created it, so PHP artisan make observer, and we just name the observer class like user observer, and we will bind it to the model using the model flag. And then we have created the polymorphic relation. So we have created the logs table, where it is here, and we have applied the morphs column here. So we can obviously do this in two separate ways, like calling one the string and the other one is the integer, but we will stick to here. And the next thing we did was basically, inside our observers, we just called the user and the logs method and created or recorded the log for our user. Now, if there is anything confusing for you guys, you can just simply ask me in the comments. And if everything pretty seems to me okay, so I think this should also seems okay to you. But still, this is what we did in our video. We have talked about polymorphic relationships. We have talked about observers, and we have created the polymorphic relationships as well. And we have just logged the data. So what else I also want is basically, we did for our this section. What I also want is basically, I also want to keep track of any further application instances occurs in, so for example, maybe if we could also track, like if the user is logged in, we can also track the user's login here as well. And I hope so you have learned something new here. If you did learn something new, please like the video and hit the subscribe button. And that's about it for this video.